that seems like a very Jesus-y sort of default posture, you know, like when I can shed off all the crap, shed the layers of like partisanship and religiosity and sort of dogmatic tradition and all that and get back to just my squishy inside, which is beloved human. Pretty quickly I get to a place where it's like, you know what we're called to, it isn't purity and perfection. It is neighborliness. It's knowing each other, loving each other. We love God by loving each other, and that love is just generous. It's just generosity. Grace is just anarchy. Grace is just free.
Welcome to Grub and Grace, where we believe the table symbolizes a space for dialogue, negotiation, and collective decision-making while untangling harmful theology and holding grace for those we disagree with. The table represents a place for all voices, especially those marginalized by empire, can be heard, and where a united people can do more for this proverbial table than divided. We dare to ask, who is our neighbor? And follow through by concluding, won't you be my neighbor? I'm your host, Mark Flower, and I am joined today by Ian McConnell, a pastor of the Fabric Church in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and enjoys standing up for his neighbors, but not getting maced in the face by ICE. Although, he'd probably happily do it if it meant protecting his fellow Minnesotans. Thanks for joining us, Ian.
Hey, glad to be here, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, sure. Now, I kind of give a little bit, you're a pastor at the Fabric Church. Do you mind maybe telling my listeners a little bit about yourself and kind of where you come from?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Ian McConnell. I'm originally from the Minneapolis area, and now after a few stints away and out of town, I now am back in Minneapolis and working as a pastor in South Minneapolis at a church called Fabric, which is initially was still is a Mission Start congregation of the Lutheran Church, so the ELCA, kind of the more progressive branch of Lutheranism in the United States. But that's my job, and as a person, I'm a husband, I'm a dad of two, I love basketball, Timberwolves and Lynx. I'm 6'3", so no one's ever accused me of being tall enough to play, but I love the game. Big Star Wars fan, and yeah, I'm like happy to be a neighbor and to be a friend, and that's just like that. There's my 30,000-foot view of myself.
No, I definitely picked up that you were a Star Wars fan. So another thing about Ian is that he sort of manages and runs a little podcast. A lot of it is his messages from his church, but he also has conversations with people. He did a message recently about the series Andor through a series at his church that he's been doing, and you can talk a little bit more about that too. And I actually just started listening to your latest episode. You had that comedian writer from CBS on your show.
Yeah, so Emily Schmidt. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always good to try to find places where you can laugh a little bit amongst, the craziness of the world here.
Right? I mean, as we're recording this, I don't know exactly, we don't know when the episode will be out, but like Minneapolis, as for anybody who's paid attention to the news in 2026 so far, Minneapolis has been kind of like ground zero for like a lot of chaos and violence being inflicted on people by the federal government. So yeah, we had Emily on the podcast, on the Fabric podcast, to just talk about like what is comedy, what's the role of comedy and storytelling in a moment like this. And man, it just seems like how we understand our own stories and how we tell our own stories and our ability to like laugh at something that's funny and like return to ourselves is maybe more important now than it ever has been, but it certainly always has been important.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's so super important. I mean, a lot of the content, a lot of the episodes that I drop aren't necessarily funny, but every once in a while I try to throw something in there where I try to have a little bit more fun with it. But so if we can have a little more fun with this one, that'd be great, because the future episodes that I have aren't necessarily the most fun. So so yeah, and anywhere I can sneak it in there, I would, I always appreciate that.
Yeah, right on.
So I've been mentioning neighbor in the intro here. We are going to be talking about, the idea of won't you be my neighbor? Who is my neighbor and that sort of thing. We could be talking about, the Good Samaritan, or Fred Rogers is a very big figurehead with this phrase, won't you be my neighbor? So when I asked you what we should talk about and I kind of dropped some things, you had mentioned like emotional intelligence. I kind of want to jump into a little bit about that. So emotional intelligence, or otherwise known as emotional quotient, EQ, is a tool that many utilize well. Fred Rogers and many others use it quite well with that. EQ, as per Psychology Today, refers to the ability to identify and manage one's own emotions, as well as the emotions of others. Emotional intelligence is generally said to include a few skills, namely emotional awareness, or the ability to identify and name one's emotions. The ability to harness those emotions and apply them to tasks like thinking and problem solving, and the ability to manage emotions, which includes both regulating one's own emotions when necessary and helping others to do the same. Fred Rogers is someone who flexed his EQ on his show with his personal relationships and as well as before Congress. Mr. Rogers' name became synonymous with the word neighbor and became a sort of model for what loving your neighbor looks like. His example can be overlaid onto the parable of the Good Samaritan, where Jesus flips the question back on the lawyer by saying, in a way, asking the question, who acted like a neighbor? Given this context, who is our neighbor and how can we act more neighborly?
I love that question. I mean, I think that Mr. Rogers did such an incredible job of modeling neighborliness, and his legacy continues. Like I know you're a dad. I'm a dad. We don't
dads.
watch. That's hey, we're we with our kids too. Like it's based on Mr. Rogers' little puppet, Daniel Tiger. And it continues. Like how do we care for ourselves and care and love, like care for and love ourselves enough that we're able to extend that to others, right? I think Mr. Rogers was a continual reminder that like actually everybody we encounter is a neighbor. It's not a contract that we enter into. It's not something that you earn. It just is something that is. And I think that Mr. Rogers, I've heard a lot of things about him, like he was a pastor or at least a seminarian. I think that's true. I think he was like a Presbyterian seminarian or something like that. Mm-hmm. But, I think that Jesus and the Good Samaritan story that he told is super apropos, right? Like, it's not about who's the right person to be a neighbor. It's about like, where is there a need and what do I have to help to meet a need? And the one who acts like a neighbor is the one who looks at a person in need or a person in pain, a person who's been targeted, a person who's been marginalized or otherwise cast aside, and say, like, I don't know you, but I recognize your humanity, and I'm going to step in to help here, instead of running through the litmus test of like, well, do they look like me? Do they sound like me? Do they eat like me? Do they enjoy the same things as me? Do they believe the same things that I do? Do they, whatever, all these like litmus tests that we sometimes fall trapped to, right? Mm-hmm. And, forget all that. When there's a person who needs us, there's a person who needs us. And so this is a very roundabout way to get to your question, which is who's our neighbor? Anybody? Everybody? Like everybody we could ever meet? I just love running into people who I don't yet know. And then by the end of an interaction, I go, oh my gosh, I recognize something of myself in this person. I got to know their story, and maybe even in the act of coming together and knowing one another, I got to know something divine. I got to get a little closer vision of what or whoever God is, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think we really get to know who God is if we're not willing to participate and act like the neighbor.
Yeah. So the pastor of my church, he did a sermon a couple weeks ago, and he phrased it in that way, that Jesus flipped the question as the lawyer asked, who is my neighbor? So the way he brought it up was that he wasn't just any lawyer. He was a lawyer of what's called mitzvot, which is the Mosaic law, and it's the law of the 613 commandments that were given by God to Moses on Mount Sinai. And so he was very specific in there. Like he knew the law. So when Jesus asked him, what is the greatest commandment, and love your God with all your heart and your soul and your mind. But then he also added on love your neighbor as yourself. So I believe that I think it's Leviticus 19:18 is the love your neighbor as yourself. So he's basically pulling from that and attaching it to the love of God. And where was I going with this? Yeah, I just love the way he phrased that it's Jesus flipped it and it was asking who acted like a neighbor, because the way that neighbor in Hebrew was typically referred to was it was your immediate like tribe, the people within your community. Anyone else outside wasn't necessarily a neighbor. But the Greek term, which is what Jesus was pulling from, or what was written in the New Testament, the term actually opens it up, and actually it's a lot more broad of a context with it. And so I thought that was like super interesting to see this kind of dichotomy of the two terms between Hebrew and Greek, and kind of what the two terms meant. So when you pull from Leviticus, it's that old Hebrew narrative of neighbor, and then Greek in the New Testament, what Jesus is referring to is this kind of like this more spatial awareness, spatial kind of people around you sort of thing.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. I like that. I mean, what's been really fascinating during this time where ICE and DHS and whatever have been essentially waging war on Minneapolis, Twin Cities, Minnesotan citizens, like, they came in with a goal that they communicated with their words, but then their actual objectives they communicated through what they were doing. And they said they were coming for the worst of the worst, and it turns out they were coming for black and brown people and anybody who would stand up for them. And I think the thing that really took them by surprise, the thing that surprised them, and I think delighted and inspired a lot of people who are watching what was happening here, is that there's not anything inherently special about people who live here, other than we tend to know our neighbors. Like the Hebrew kind of understanding of like the people literally like nearby, like that physical nearness, like we know our neighbors, and it matters that you know your neighbors, that you look at each other in the eyes and you know each other's names and you know something about each other. You develop trust over time, and then you can lean on one another and stand up for one another and that kind of thing. I think neighborliness right now, in terms of like who's in your physical neighborhood, can be really challenging too, because across the past many decades, something new has happened that has never really happened in a hyper-local context for a long time, which is like we have divided out, by class, by socioeconomic background, by ethnicity, by race, by language and cuisine, and all sorts of things that have become wedges because they're neighborhood specific. And that can be really beautiful in some ways, but it can be really challenging in others, that like what's happening to my neighbors over in that neighborhood I'm not even aware of, right? Until it's too late. But I don't know their names. I don't know anything about them, and they don't know me. We don't have each other's numbers. We can't rely on one another, that kind of thing. And so to look at it in a more universal kind of 30,000 foot view, anybody is a neighbor. And I can't know everybody, but I can at least recognize their humanity and their value. And I think that seems like a very Jesus-y sort of default posture, like when I can shed off all the crap, shed the layers of like partisanship and religiosity and sort of dogmatic tradition and all that, and get back to just my squishy inside, which is beloved human. Pretty quickly I get to a place where it's like, what we're called to, it isn't purity and perfection. It is neighborliness. It's knowing each other, loving each other. We love God by loving each other, and that love is just generous. It's just generosity. Grace is just anarchy. Grace is just free. Anyhow, I'm going on a preachy tangent here.
No, preach away. So I'll move on to the second part. Mr. Rogers, he always talked about the helpers. He didn't shy away from many topics that others would avoid, especially for a children's show. It was very revolutionary in its time. He wanted to provide a space in helping children deal with tragic events in the news. Famously, Fred Rogers said that his mother would tell him to look for the helpers whenever there was disaster, conflict, or strife. There can be a lot to unpack with this phrase. How would you interpret it?
Yeah, look for the helpers. I think the immediate interpretation of that phrase is like look to be inspired by the people who are showing up to help, or to like, see how people are helping and then do that. But I think at a deeper level, in moments like this where like conflict and chaos and violence and strife, fear aren't just sort of theoretical ideas, but they're embodied realities for a lot of people. And that's not new. There's people for whom that's just their daily reality around the world. And so when I think about that, look for the helpers at a little bit of a deeper level, I think that what I think about is it's so easy when that conflict is happening or when violence is happening or whatever, it's so easy to fix my gaze on the ones that have the hoarded power, or the ones who are doing violence, or the ones who are the perpetrators of power being wielded. But I think that the real power is in humanity. So I think, the human thing to do in light of disaster and conflict and strife, the human thing to do is to show up with and for one another. And so it's less a fuzzy feel good, like, wow, there's still good in the world, even though we're really paying attention to who's perpetrating this nastiness, and we're going to get, we're going to exact our revenge and whatever. But really, it's more of this imperative to look nearby, get local, not only look for the people who are helping one another, but like be the people who are helping one another, and look to community, look to humanity, not to the disastrous impact of power unchecked on humanity. Yeah.
Yeah, it's this phrase. It was originally intended, be geared towards children, because children they don't know how to process like all this, what's on the news and everything that's going on in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But he said this in a way because children, because they're not able to process everything, and when they see something wrong, go totally wrong, or something that's just very scary and causing a fear response, that doesn't necessarily give them the fear response. They don't have the tools to really understand how to process that. So in order to understand, they look to their parents, they look to adults, they look to figureheads within their lives to understand and see their reactions to what's going on. If let's say there's war that breaks out and the child's parents are acting fearful and chaotic and just like, what's going on? The child's going to take that response and understand this is how I'm supposed to react to this going forward. But if the parents are acting calm and collected and kind of, having some sort of balanced approach to what's going on, the child's going to see that and it'll actually create a healthier experience for kind of thinking through things for later in life. I can honestly see a lot of how that play that he's kind of working within this phrase of how it can be translated into like what's happening, in the world for adults even.
Yeah.
With, news stations, social media, like, all this stuff out there. And, if the people that you see as figureheads are acting chaotic and crazy, or they're, you're only getting fed like certain information and which demonizes someone else and what this, you're going to take that and you're going to make that part of your identity, your persona, and everything, how you react to other things moving forward. And yeah, it's looking toward the helpers, looking towards people that are helping the situation, looking out for, like in this case, neighbors who are helping and trying to make sense of what's going on. So it's one of those phrases that like can easily like be, I wouldn't say misattributed or like mistranslated, but going deeper into it and kind of understanding like his what he intended for that phrase, it makes it a little bit more like tangible and easily to understand and apply to your own life.
Massively so. I mean, when you think of I think I share this with Mr. Rogers, that the main story, like the main characters in stories, for me seem to always be children. Like how is what's happening impacting the kids and their future? And if the future of the children is in good solid, then I'm okay. But what you were just saying kind of opened up for me this thought of like wondering how are the kids. And I think that like the Maasai tribe in Africa who don't greet each other with hello, how are you? The greeting, the standard greeting is, and how are the children? And I think at some level, when I was a younger person, early 20s, whatever, I looked at the ways that the elders in my life, in our culture, were acting in a very self-serving kind of way, like willing to go to war at the expense of the lives of young people, willing to not engage in environmental protection because it wasn't good for their pocketbooks or whatever. And what makes me curious is like, if we're no longer the children, which we aren't, like I'm 40, I'm a supporting cast member in the lives and stories of children now. Like my responsibility is to be a helper, so that question that is asked ultimately to children, not to us adults, look for the helpers, that when they look to me, they see a helper, that they have an example. And that requires, to go back to the emotional intelligence, like that requires that us adults are doing our work of learning about ourselves and learning how to manage our feelings and not just cope with life, but actually to handle it well and to metabolize our feelings and to recognize that our emotions are just emotions. They're not in the driver's seat. They don't need to get in the driver's seat. So I guess that's a thought that came to mind for me, for sure.
Yeah. So going back to my pastor, he was closing up his sermon, and he was telling a story about how a woman approached him at a gas station asking for gas, and was going about how he was obviously judging her and being human about that. But he came to this realization that that this woman is somebody's daughter. This woman is someone's sister. This woman is someone's mother. Whoever she is. But in turn, she's also his neighbor, because he is someone's son, he is someone's brother, he is someone's, father. When we start kind of realizing how close and how not distant we are from one another, we really are all just neighbors to each other. He closed with this whole thing. He said, here's the question Jesus leaves us hanging. It's the question the lawyer couldn't answer with legal precision, and neither can we. The question is this. Not who is my neighbor, but what kind of neighbor am I? And the question, it rarely resolves neatly. It just keeps meeting us at gas stations, in our news feeds, across yard signs and language barriers, and all the spaces where the stranger stands before us waiting to be seen. It may not always feel Jesus-y for us. It might even feel a little annoying and leave us feeling a little unsure, to be skeptical. But maybe that's where grace begins, in that small uncomfortable space between judgment and compassion, between stranger and family. And every time we choose to cross that space, however imperfectly, we discover that God's neighborhood is not built by deciding who belongs inside our circle, but by letting love widen the circle one human being at a time. I thought that was just a beautiful way to wrap up his little sermon.
Yeah, that's gorgeous. I love that. Love that. Yeah, the question that keeps haunting us forever and ever. Amen.
Yes. So to keep moving forward with the helpers, when it comes to media consumption, there's a lot that any person will have to process. Steve Bannon, an influential figure to Trump, said they needed to flood the zone with shit. This abundance of information, whether true or false, overloads the senses, creating a reptile brain. When something comes out, something that goes against state-sponsored messaging, 10 other stories drop, or Trump makes a rash decision to attack another country. When it comes to ICE, Noem made rather quick diagnoses after the assassinations of Rene Good and Alex Preddy. And when the shift of the people moved away from the official narrative, the zone was filled with more shit. Like an additional Epstein file drop or anything that will divert and cause polarization. Looking through the lens of Mr. Rogers looking for the helpers, how can we weed through the zone of content overload and not get bogged down so we can still focus on how to be a neighbor and find collectivism among all of us?
Wow, they are really good at flooding the zone, aren't they?
They are.
Golly. So looking through the lens of looking for the helpers. I
Yeah,
mean,
gravitate
I think,
me too.
yeah, it's such a good question. Looking through that lens, how can we weed through the zone of content overload, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I think that how we tell our stories and how we understand what's happening to us matters so profoundly. And we need others to tell our story to receive our story, and we need others to help interpret what's happening. I think what I noticed after like Renee Good was killed and then after Alex Preddy was killed and every time something like this happens is there is a rush by the people in power with the supposed responsibility to help care for and tend to this experiment that we're in, this human experiment. There's such a rush to protect themselves by spinning a narrative, to make excuses, to blame a victim, right? I'm sure there are in particular people of color or women who listen to your podcast who are just screaming, going like, yeah, duh. Like this is
There's a whole history of
forever.
this
This has been,
stuff.
yeah, it's right. This is nothing new.
Us white people waking up.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Just want, name that reality. But I think that whatever the spun narrative is, as the zone is being flooded with shit, to not pay attention to it so much. Like this is what I was talking about, like that where my gaze is focused. Like, don't focus on those with power. They're motivated to protect themselves and to hold on to power at any expense. Instead, hold each other up, participate in collective action, be a part of I need to recognize that I am not the hero. I am in mutual relationship. So I'm not just going to save, I'm going to be saved through relationship. I'm not going to just help them. I'm going to be in relationship with them because ultimately that's going to make a bigger impact for the long haul than anything else. I guess that's my first run at that question, but I think that being a neighbor and finding that collectivism, that mutuality, the relationships, that's far more important than the ways in which powerful people are trying to protect and preserve themselves.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you were pretty heavily involved with the protests and whatnot in Minneapolis when everything was very heavy over there. I know there's
Hmm.
still a lot of presence over there. They haven't completely pulled out as they were, saying they would.
Yeah.
Or at least pulled a chunk of people out. But you got to see firsthand instead of just seeing things through a lens on your phone what you're being shown but from other people, and depending on what news sources you pull from, you can get any number of interpretations on what's going on too, but you got a completely different perspective on everything, the focal point of what had been going on at the beginning of this year, and that definitely can shift your perception. And if you're not getting involved like that, you really are just at the whims of whatever your phone wants to show you, whatever your TV wants to show you. It's hard to feel really connected, and I think that's the importance of getting involved, whether it be protest or some other way, even just as small as just getting to know your neighbors and seeing if they have any needs. Ask them, find out, who they are and what they're all about, and figure out their needs. If it's like a single mother that needs help, help with groceries every so often, help with. I mean, childcare is kind of a tricky one because you don't want to hire someone on to be a child care person for a night. That you have to be someone that you can trust, but you can help them in plenty other
Yeah.
ways too. Like I said, groceries, if it's financial, if it's if they don't have a car, maybe you can drive someone to work, or even just to like a medical appointment or something like that. So there's lots of ways to get involved that really get you more connected aside from just your phone. Your perspective change is definitely one step in the whole thing, but yeah, there's many layers to this whole thing, and especially when you're looking at everything too. It's so I've been reading like the Communist Manifesto and like Das Kapital by by
Mm-hmm.
Marx, and it kind of talks about this, like this way of thinking where when something happens, looking at the helpers, there's certain ways to look at it so that you don't just so it doesn't just kind of take over your mind and just kind of shut you down. And that way you can look at things a little bit more objectively is to think about certain questions when you're viewing this new news, is to think of like who's benefiting from this. Think of I'm blanking on some of the other key points but there's certain ways to think about things so that you can kind of take a step back, see things from that 30,000 foot view, and not be just so like quick to react and say this is this, or I'm fearful so I'm going to run away and go this way and do something else. Yeah, it can be a lot.
No, that is so true. I mean, the media we consume, like the landscape that we're in, is so fascinating to look at because the ways that it's all been segmented out and sort of monopolized. There's an author and professor of communication who wrote a book many years ago. His name is Marshall McLuhan, and he wrote a book called "The Medium is the Massage," ASSAGE, which was a typo with the printer, but it turned into sort of this prophetic title. But like the mediums that we choose to get news or updates or information, like what to expect already. When you watch cable news, you're there for the commercials and to have your biases, reaffirmed. Like I think that's one big thing about being, in the Western world right now, is to recognize that that's just true. The medium is the message, and I think rather than just believe what we're being told by corporations that have an agenda and have a vested interest in our belief, which one way or the other. I would say this is true not just for media companies, but like governments, churches, religious groups, especially para-church and para-religious groups. Like they have vested interest in us believing or fearing the right things strategically. But the other thing we know, from your own life, that something that hurts is painful, right? So we can believe our own experiences. You can believe what you see with your own eyes in your own neighborhood, in your own context. And so, sure, watch the news, listen to the news, but also, maybe even more importantly, believe what you see, believe what you hear from your neighbors, from your family, because their experience is real. And I think that kind of helps me sift through some of the bullshit to say like, yeah, I might not understand why I'm hearing this, or why when I just saw Alex Preddy get shot in the back, they're saying he was attacking the police. I'm curious about that, right? But like ultimately, believe what you see. And this is like George Orwell 1984. Like we're living it out, right? Like the final, the final ask of the party or whatever, it was going to be to not believe your eyes. Believe what you see, believe what you hear, believe what you experience. Let your experience of joy be joyful. Let your experience of pain be painful. And when you hear of somebody else's, that's something that you can respond to. Like you have the ability to respond. You have the respond ability to people's experience. Yeah.
I'm always surprised with how many people, with like my friends and just people I talk to, that have not read 1984 by George Orwell.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm always surprised. Like, I'll bring it up in conversation. I'm like, you've read that book, right? And they're like, no, I haven't read that book yet, but I've been meaning to. And I'm like, I thought this was like standard, like middle school reading.
Yeah, totally, right? I mean, I think if I were to add two things to like the American curriculum, it would be, or maybe even like, it's almost good enough that I would canonize it, like put it in the Bible, is one, George Orwell, 1984. So good. But the other is Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham City Jail to the moderate white clergy around him. Those two things, it's a whole new frame to look through, right? It's a lens to look through at reality.
You say that, and I haven't even read the letter from Birmingham Jail. I've been meaning
so
to.
Good.
See, I've got why we can't wait on my bookshelf over here, but I don't have the letter from Birmingham Jail, so I need to get on that.
It's really good. It's a short read. It's not an easy read. It's a simple read, and it's a short read. And, just like any of Paul's letters in the Bible, like just recognize, like, this is within a certain context. You're reading somebody else's mail, but it certainly applies to our world right now. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, when you're talking about just getting to know your neighbors and everything, I looked up this
Yeah.
quote from Fred Rogers. So it says, "It's through relationships that we learn best and grow best. When you care about someone and know that person cares about you, you want to learn from them and strive to do your best." So I just love that. Everything he says about neighbors is just so great.
Yeah. It's true.
So I do want to move on to this, the poem First They Came. I have talked about First They Came on a couple of my episodes before, but I feel like this is kind of pertinent to this episode. So the poem by German Luther pastor Martin Niemöller, First They Came, which reflects on the dangers of indifference and the consequences of not speaking out against oppression. By not speaking up earlier, he reflects that there is no one else to stand up for him when it directly impacts him. I actually kind of want to read this poem really fast.
Yeah.
So it reads, "First they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not communist. Then they came out for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me." When it comes to rights being infringed on and the imperial boomerang coming around full circle with ICE and surveillance, how does the words of Martin Niemöller resonate with many Americans today?
Yeah, I mean, we're watching it. We're watching it live, right? Or experiencing it live for sure. I think Niemöller was writing from a particularly privileged position, right? The poem he wrote indicates pretty clearly, like, I wasn't in any of the groups that were the first to get targeted, but ultimately I learned too late that their well-being matters to my well-being too. And so, I mean, we're watching that happen. I think there are a lot of my friends who, are black and brown and queer and femme or female. They're all looking at these moments and going like, yes, welcome to the fight. Alex Preddy was killed. Oh, now you feel targeted. That's precious, right? But it's kind of, it's like the reality of what we're watching is that if we look at each other first and foremost as a label that we would put on one another, like communist, like trade unionist, like black, gay, whatever these labels, like if that's the first thing we see, then it's easier for us to dehumanize one another and to accidentally sometimes even participate in the dehumanization of others. Instead, I think the posture that I would hope to continue to develop and practice is one where my default posture, I think like those little toys in the 90s where you could like put a pin in the back and it would like, the little electronic toys, like reset the settings. Like, I want to just click that little button on our entire society and say, look, we're people. We're human beings together. And those differences matter, right, in all the ways that they do. And we need to center people's humanity and their dignity, and that they don't need to earn our support. They don't need to earn love. They don't need to earn any of it. Like that is the default. They have it already. We all have it. And so when it's threatened, we activate. I am waiting, if I'm honest, I'm waiting for a big, huge swath of our country to recognize that the people that they are villainizing and demonizing are humans. Like, damn. We dehumanize each other left and right all day. I do it. I'm guilty of it too. I'm not saying I'm above it. Like, it's something I actively struggle with. Is I look at these ICE agents on the corners. I have called them goons and thugs on my social media, because that's what they're acting like, right? But like, that's somebody's kid too. Like that's somebody who has the capacity to love. There's a guy in my congregation who says regularly, he reminds us that you are loved, you are loving, and you are capable of love. I want to live like I remember that. I want to, and I'm waiting on people who perpetrate violence and dehumanization, I'm waiting for them to remember, firstly, that they are loved and capable of love too, so that they can not only believe that, but act like they believe that, you know? And I think when it comes to faith, you know, Niemöller was a pastor and author, like theologian. When it comes to being people of faith, like I don't I don't want to hear about somebody's faith in Jesus Christ, their personal Lord and Savior. I don't want to hear it. Show me. Show me in how you treat other people, right? Show me in how you regard others, even and especially when they're not in the room. Then I'll believe what you say you believe. Then I'll believe that you believe what you say you believe. Otherwise, it's just showmanship. It's the noisy gong of the prophet Amos. It's the clanging cymbal and the noisy gong. It's just noise.
Mm-hmm.
Watch what has happened in Minneapolis, to watch what has happened to the Latino community in the United States currently, to watch what's happened to and continues to happen to Black Americans, to women of across history, and to not even just feel something about it, let alone do something about it, indicates to me that like we have lost our soul. I mean, we have lost our ability to claim any kind of moral or ethical position of authority. I mean, truly. I mean, we once we start acting like we believe in Jesus, that's a whole different thing.
There's a whole different thing. Yeah, there's I've been noticing a lot of people, or at least being face forward in my feeds and whatnot, of coming
Hmm.
out of, and it's easy to say, just in this whole thing, the mega crowd and everything like that.
Yeah.
This could literally be anybody, any ideology, political, saying whatever it is. But yeah, you have to constantly remind yourself that is someone's son, that is someone's daughter, that is some brother or sister, that is our neighbor. Although we can condemn what they're doing, like what you're saying. Show what's in your heart. I mean, it's the whole thing of like, from what's in your heart comes out your mouth. But I think that should translate into not just your mouth, but your actions as well. And your actions will showcase what's in your heart as well.
Mm.
And you can condemn what's going on while still holding that grace, that space to welcome them in, and to allow grace and place for forgiveness, when that time comes, when critique and condemning of behaviors subsides. But it's like the whole thing of like Bonhoeffer, of the cheap grace versus costly grace. And
Yeah.
what's happening with like the administration, where right after Renee Good and Alex Preddy, like the administration, Kristi Noem, she immediately started labeling things as like that was domestic terrorism, that was without really any facts on the ground, just what we saw from videos, just this is what it is. And it's like this quick or quick what's the word, absolving of
Absolvement, absolution.
something like that, one of those words of what the ICE agents did, and just siding with them immediately and just saying we're all good, move on, nothing to see here.
Yeah.
And it definitely costs a lot more to not be so quick and so rash, to look at facts, talk to people, consider relationships, consider people's lives, how it impacts people and stuff like that. That's where the costly grace comes in. And if you're not doing that, if you're just acting rashly, if you're not allowing for grace, that's where that cheap grace comes in. And he also talks about stupidity. I mean, you could go into the stupidity of it too. But yeah, there's a whole lot that you could probably break down with all that. But the thing with like Martin Niemöller, I mean, he was a pastor, and he came around and wrote this poem, which is very like eye-opening, and should be heard by everybody. But he wasn't always in that position to say I should have stood up. I mean, obviously there has to be a history before then of why he wrote those things. He's writing these things because those are the groups at the time that were demonized. If you look at inside the church, even the church perpetuates a culture, and I'm talking about like the mainline church, primarily evangelical, but could be any church really, where it perpetuates an environment, a community of being okay with this like dehumanization. It almost like this internal kind of like are you part of the tribe sort of mentality. And if you question anything, that ousts you. So it kind of keeps people within this confines of the community and of this kind of thinking. And that perpetuates a cycle so that you can come to this kind of like, I'm okay with dehumanizing this group of people because there's some semblance of logic, although if you really put any thought into it, it really just falls apart. But that's how like cults work.
So quick.
I don't want to say like the evangelical communities are cults, but there are similarities, there are parallels to what are traditionally known as cults, especially what we see in the mega crowd right now. He spoke out against this. He was actually Martin Niemöller. He was actually in line with what was going on in Germany with the mustache man, and he was following in line and thinking, I'm just doing my task as a pastor to do what I need to do to allow the system to do what it needs to do. And then he figured it out too late. And like you were saying, like our brown brothers and sisters, our queer brothers and sisters, like they have been yelling this for years and decades and millennia even. And I think just because we're waking up now, it isn't a bad thing, but it's kind of one of those things like I wish I would have woken up a little bit sooner than this.
Yeah.
But now that we're in the fight, helping them out, I mean, it's just one less for this, complacent other side, and another for, trying to help others find justice and equality and equity and everything like that. So yeah, it's crazy.
Isn't it? I mean, I'm glad you named it, like the kind of cult mentality. I mean, like you think of like the markers, the characteristics of a cult, of like, authoritarian leadership and isolation of members and the suppression of critical thinking. I mean, these are big deals. That's a big deal. And the further you go down that path and the more you dig your heels in, when presented with compelling evidence that what you're doing is harmful, and the more you dig your heels in, the harder it is to come out of that, because we end up wanting that cheap grace, which requires nothing of us, right? I mean, it's like forgiveness without repentance. Or I guess forgiveness doesn't require repentance, but like it
Depends on who you ask.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, this is a whole other conversation. But like, if you need forgiveness, ought to come with grace, ought to come with a big aha moment of like, I have an opportunity to become something, to become somebody bigger than I have been, a better version of myself. I mean, that's that cheap versus costly grace. People are starting to wake up to, hopefully, the reality that like this cult of personality that so many have fallen into, both politically and religiously and whatever, like maybe it's not great, but that's just an indication that like, okay, I have work to do now. Like if I'm going to restore my relationships, I mean, to talk about not just forgiveness, but reconciliation, that's the key distinction. I believe personally that forgiveness, I forgive somebody else to free myself. It's reconciliation, which is the restoration of relationship. That takes a lot more effort. If I've hurt somebody, first of all, I have to, the kind of churchy word is repent. I need to own up to my responsibility for whatever has happened. I need to turn from that way of being and try something different. And also there's reparations work to do. I mean, the reconciliation process is something that in the United States, we really have very little models to look to, like within our own borders. We don't really do it. We just sort of like, oops, moving on, and then pretend like the people who have been harmed are just going to be like, oh, thank goodness. Oh, now we're friends. You haven't done anything to indicate that you're safe now, but like, okay, whatever. I mean, I think that's a big thing right now that we're going to need to be honest about, and we're going to need to face that reality that they came for people who were othered, and we said nothing. And now here we all are under the boot of power or whatever, and we need each other. But in order for me to become a trustworthy person, I need to say like, ooh, I have participated in the oppression of others. That's true, I have. And I hate that, and I could bury my head in the sand about it and pretend I didn't. Or I could say, you know what, I am learning, I'm not done learning, and I I have to own up to that. I need to ask for forgiveness, but also I need to repair the relationship. I need to repay the debts that I have benefited from. We need to do all this work if we're gonna, I don't know, become what we believe we could be. As a as a neighborhood, as a community, as a state, as a nation, we have yet to live up to our highest goals or our highest vision of ourselves. Yeah, it's going to take some work.
It's definitely going to take some work. I'm going to wrap it up with this last question here, and it's just how we can help our neighbors, friends, and everyone who we may disagree with and everything. So how might we allow others to realize the importance of becoming active when they see some form of injustice? So how can we, like I said, help our neighbors, help those that we disagree with, who see things differently than us? How can we allow them to kind of see that and then becoming active and getting involved in some way?
Well, I think first it requires each of us to just try saying out loud, what's normal for me might not be normal for everybody. My perspective might not be the only perspective. Or maybe a different way of saying it is, I might be wrong. And just try that on and live with it for a little bit, because that's hard to do. And then I think then be open to other sort of philosophies, other modes of thinking and being. I love Ubuntu, the South African philosophy, right? Of I am because we are. My well-being is tied up to yours. Everything is connected. Everything is interconnected. Everything is woven. To recognize that. And even things like my success, like the ways that I've been successful in my life, or the things that I would consider wins, weren't done just by me. I am a part of a network of support and resources and everything. And to recognize that there is enough within the network of support and resources to share. What would it take for me to share the resources and the networks and the power that I have so that others can come alongside me, not in place of me, but alongside me? And how can I come alongside others? That's human ingenuity. That is what has made us make incredible scientific leaps and innovative leaps and inventive. It's our spirit of innovation and inventiveness. That, nothing is done in isolation. I don't know. That's where I would start with that question, is to help others realize the importance of becoming active. I think really comes down to, we need to know ourselves in different and new ways, and so that we can know and understand others and love others in new ways. Because when I then see my neighbor, whoever my neighbor is, whether I like them or not, when I see that they're being oppressed or hurt, or there's a system at play that's bigger than just individuals, that's hurting them, and I might even be benefiting from it, I have no choice but to respond to that and acknowledge that. So yeah, that's what I say.
I'm going to throw some by you, because while you were talking, I was like, this is kind of an idea. So with Martin Niemöller, I mean, he wrote this thing, coming to terms with everything. He said, first they came for all these people, and they came for me. The word appreciation came to me. He didn't appreciate these people that were othered before it was too late, before it impacted him. When it comes to this kind of very self-serving, kind of self-indulgent kind of lifestyle that America has created, all we really appreciate is ourselves, as well as the things within our lives, or the things that immediately impact us and for our own benefit. Finding appreciation across all sorts of different things, I'll just say that, just to make it really general. Find appreciation with your neighbor. Find appreciation with the way something is run, like a process. Find appreciation with things that don't immediately impact you, that aren't really part of your sphere that you take up. Fred Rogers actually came to bring full circle. Fred Rogers, he says, I believe that appreciation is a holy thing. In appreciating our neighbor, we're participating in something truly sacred. And I think there really is something with that, especially with the Good Samaritan. Is, you get those first two people in the parable that walked past him. They They were people of his cloth, of his tribe, his neighbor, as the Hebrew, the Riyah, that is the neighbor aspect of that. They really should have been the people that have stopped and helped them. And think nowadays you get a mega church pastor and a police chief that just walk past them. Then you get someone that isn't within that we'll just say white circle that comes by and helps this person that was beaten by thugs and robbers and thieves. I feel like it's this person that appreciates the world around them and all of God's creation as opposed to just their immediate surroundings. And I feel like, especially with that parable, the word appreciation really could be applied to that very, very directly. So I think Fred Rogers was onto something. I feel like, his idea of who a neighbor is was really pulled from some of these stories and concepts that Jesus had brought forth with the New Testament. I don't know, just the word appreciation. How do you feel about the word appreciation and my kind of reckoning with it?
Yeah, I think I like that. I mean, it's not the word that would have come to mind for me, but I mean, it's really like, what would that be? Like taking enjoyment in the existence or the positive qualities about something. And I think I don't even have to understand somebody to appreciate them. I don't have to understand a piece of art in its entirety to be moved by it. I don't have to understand a song or a language or the halftime show to appreciate it, to say, wow, this is beautiful, or this is not familiar to me, but wow, look at how moved my neighbor is. Look how this matters to somebody. And if I am connected, now if I belong to all that is, to everybody else, because we all just belong to one another, then it matters, and then I can appreciate. So that's good wrestling. I like that.
Maybe you can bring it home in one of your messages.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful.
Why don't we wrap this up here? So if people want to hear more about you, where can they find more about you? Because obviously, the Fabric Church and whatnot, but why don't you let people know where they can find you if they want to hear more?
Yeah, cool. Fabric MPLS, Minneapolis is a little short term there. MPLS.com is our website, and we're on most socials at Fabric MPLS. And I have, I've got a Substack and TikTok and Instagram, Pastor Ian McConnell, in most of those places. Or loose threads with Ian McConnell is the Substack. And I do a little bit of writing, a lot of video stuff. Love to engage with people. So, anywhere you do find me, drop a note, say hi. And yeah, I'm trying to be as active as I can. The other thing I would mention is there's a Substack and podcasting project that I'm a part of right now with a couple colleagues, Rosella Ide White, she's the Love Big coach, and Reverend Tuhina Rash. The three of us are doing a project that we're calling Reclaim the Church, and kind of looking at like church structures. And you think of church, when you think of church, you think of Christianity. A lot of times the first thing you think of are the sort of the noisiest voices, and maybe even some of the most toxic voices in American church and Christianity. But what we're trying to do is saying well, what if we kind of strip it down a little bit and locate those little golden nuggets that are so beautiful, that are so community based, that are so compelled by the life story, and teachings of Jesus, that we can't quite let that go. So that's the Reclaim the Church project that we're a part of.
I'm glad you got that in there. I was about to ask you if you wanted to pitch that or not.
Yeah.
Well, Ian, thank you so much for jumping on this episode. I've been wanting to talk more about Fred Rogers just because he's such an influential person on my life, and just so many others. So thanks for coming on and talking about this, and just working in with other aspects of what's going on in the world too. So thanks
Absolutely.
for jumping on and doing this.
Thanks for having me. And the one Fred Rogers quote that I want to leave you with is just simply, if it's mentionable, it's manageable. So if we can talk about this stuff, we can do something with it, right?
Love it. That's a great one to end on.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.